in an argument right now with my buddy Ryan, and here's what Ryan contends. Okay, let's back up. Sean O'Malley. Sugar Sean comes out and says, someday I will be UFC champion. So this is what starts the topic. Private conversation, and Ryan says to me, well, Chael, when is too early to come out and declare that a guy is going to be the future champion? And I was pondering the question and thinking to answer that when he comes on the back of it and says, because, the UFC very early identified that that was going to be Conor McGregor, and that put all sorts of pressures on Conor. Now, by the time he finished that thought, I almost didn't have time to respond to the first question that had to do with Sean O'Malley. Because now I'm stuck on the fact that I don't think my buddy Ryan is correct on that. I totally disagree that the UFC identified Conor as a future champion. The way I interpreted what happened with Conor, whose career is like a fine wine. His career's got so much better in time. Hold that thought. I do not believe the UFC identified him as a champion. I believe they identified him as a star. And there is a major difference there. And I was really right there in the mix when Conor Mania began. We fought on the same card. I saw it. This was Conor's second fight. I sat at the press conference and listened to this guy. I hadn't met him. His first fight, I didn't see. It was an undercard fight. I just didn't see it. Kenny Florian pulls me aside at one conversation and says, hey, you seen this Conor McGregor kid? I said, no. He goes, you have to watch him. He's amazing. Michael Bisping pulls me aside at a different conversation and says the exact same thing Kenny did. Hey, you seen this Conor McGregor kid? You got to see him. He's absolutely amazing. I know who he was. I never took the time to go look him up. If a guy's a good fighter, I'll hear of him. I live in the space. Hadn't heard of him, so we get to a press conference together. He's 1-0. I'm main eventing the show. We got people in the audience. There was some contest going around. Who can do the best Conor McGregor bow tie? I've been to a lot of press conferences. I've never seen a sign held up. It's not like a pro wrestling show where people are holding up a sign. Randy Orton, marry me. It's not like that. There was signs all throughout the crowd. Irish signs and McGregor signs and Conor for president signs. I've never seen anything like it. I'm looking, wait a minute, I know about this guy. That's who Kenny Florian and Michael Bisping were telling me about. What the hell's this guy got an audience for? He 1-0. Fighting on an undercard. Okay. So what I'm sharing for you is I think that the UFC was very quick to identify. And those are your ultimate focus groups. When a guy's name gets said at a press conference, when a guy gets questions at a press conference, when a guy has a bigger crowd at an open workout, when a guy gets a pop and he comes through the curtain at the weigh-in, Dana White, that little computer is going off. He is storing all the noise. We call it a pop. Who gets the biggest pop? He's storing these things away. You want to know who's going to get a higher placement on the next card? It's whoever got the loudest noise when he came out for the previous card. And I think they saw this in Conor. Now, the reason I say Conor's career was like a fine wine, many guys have been helped in the office, but the office would never admit to that because that's something that boxing does that MMA just doesn't want anything to do with. We don't carry guys. We don't build guys. The best fight's the best. I will admit to you, yes, many guys have been helped in the office. But for the office to come out and say, yes, we are building this guy. We admit it. We're bringing this guy favorable competition. We see star power in this athlete. I can only think of one guy they've ever said that about, and that was Conor. But now let's take a look at how much they really helped him, okay? They wanted to help Conor out one night. In fact, it was the night I was talking about, the night I met him at the press conference. So they brought in a young, unknown kid to get beat up, to go do the job. That kid is named Max Holloway. But he is named Max Holloway in 2013, 2 years before Max Holloway's Max Holloway. 3 years before he becomes the greatest featherweight on Earth. 5 years before he becomes the greatest featherweight in the history of Earth. Okay, full credit to Conor. They then bring him another very easy fight. They bring him a young kid out of Kentucky, 26 years old, named Dustin Poirier. This is 5 years before Dustin Poirier is the champion of the world. This is 4 years before Dustin Poirier is a consummate number one contender for the championship in the world. 6 years before he's sharing the octagon for 5 full rounds with Khabib Nurmagomedov. I mean, what I'm saying, go back and look at who Conor beat on his easy fights, on his helpful fights, right? It's one of the problems you have in the office. You don't know who somebody is And one thing about this sport, whoever has the biggest name is the better fighter. It's always been that way. It's always been that way. Perception is reality. And I've always wondered if people have ever gone back. I highly, highly disagree with Ryan's premise. I do not think Conor was identified as an early champion. I do not believe the night that Conor walked in against Jose Aldo that the office thought Conor was going over. I thought they thought, you know what, we had a good run. We took a guy with 2 fights. His 3rd fight, he became a main event, sold out. His 4th fight, he was a main event, sold out. His 5th fight, main event, sold out. His 6th fight, he wins an interim championship. We had a good run with this guy. We're smart enough to figure out how to rebuild him. I mean, nobody's beating Jose, but if he could just go out there and compete. 11 seconds later, he's sitting on top of the octagon holding the belt up. I just don't agree that Conor was carried to be champion. I think he was identified as a star, accurately so. Champion? I think Conor, for the potential that people saw in him early, even the Kenny Florins and the Michael Bispings of the world, as big as they were on him, and their opinions matter, I don't think they ever saw double champ. And now that Conor's at 170, and I've had people all the way to Errol Hawani push back on me for saying that Conor just might be the new number 1 contender at 170. Guys, if I look where the pieces are going to fall, Tony versus Justin goes right into the winner of Tony versus Justin versus Khabib. Pushes the date way out. Meanwhile, in July, which appears, even in this weird world we're in right now, July does appear to be a very safe date. May. Scott Coker's come out and talked about June. July is a pretty safe date. And that happens to be when Usman is fighting Masvidal, which would be perfect timing to bring Conor in on the back of that, as opposed to having Conor sit out until potentially December, if not January of next year. Why, just to fight Khabib? What's the difference? Title's a title. Conor's Conor. I think it's likely Conor fights for the 170-pound title.